Hello, everybody out there in YouTube land. It's your T-shirt historian here for a morning of Dungeons and Discussions with my co-host Grim.
Hello.
He's so exciting.
I was going to say, sounding enthusiastic as always.
Oh yeah, that's Grim for you. And yes, we also have the eclectic goat who is joining us for this morning's show and perhaps future shows if we make a good enough impression on her. So,
Yes.
I mean, I'm double fisting whiskey at 10 o'clock in the morning here, so, you know, you don't have to make a very good impression.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm double fisting like caffeine and rain because I've got woken up at 6:15 this morning and couldn't go back to sleep, so I've just been kind of like it's kind of sucks because it's like it's too early in the morning to do anything productive, and yet I don't want to feel like I'm not doing anything productive. So
You
I feel
should,
like I'm wasting time.
you should come join me in my life. I promise I can find you productive things to do that early in the morning. I overslept this morning. I got up at 7 o'clock, and that's oversleeping by about 2 hours and 15 minutes.
That's okay. I don't know if I want a wife that bad, but
Well, I mean, you'd have
honey,
to,
since you're up, can you do this?
I mean, there's a reason that my husband is so eager to leave for work at 5:30 when his shift starts at 7.
Oh yeah, I could imagine. Well, all right, we're coming at you live on X, which is kind of new. So if I'm not responding to you on X, it's probably because I don't see you. Honestly,
I'm
it's like
impressed. I'm impressed you can get it to work. I've never been able to get it to actually go through.
I'm not actually sure if it is working or not, just because it's like I can't see it. So I have to hope the magic is working.
Well, I
Anyway.
always get a giant alert that basically says, "Hey, this didn't work." So
Huh.
I'd say no news is good news.
Oh well.
Probably.
Well, all right. There's not been anything specific in the gaming world as far as TTRPGs go that is newsworthy at this point. Wizards of the Coast actually hasn't done anything offensive in a while. As far as I know, everybody's pretty happy with Fabula Ultima right now because it's fun. The only thing I'm
Yes.
unhappy about Fabula Ultima with is the fact that they don't print the damn books faster.
Yeah, printing and shipping is slow there.
Very. And hey, Daniel, if you want a link, man, I'll post it up in our Week in Geek chat for you. I should have done that anyway, but not enough caffeine.
So I'm entertained by the fact that Wizards of the Coast hasn't done anything offensive means there's no news in the gaming world.
Yeah,
Well,
pretty much.
I
Well,
mean,
everyone's off at conventions, aren't they?
Mhm.
It was just the UK Games Expo, and then there's something in the States at the moment.
Yeah.
I would love to attend the UK. I think we talked about this, that like I can actually like fly to the UK Gaming Expo from here, and it is cheaper than me trying to go to a large convention on the other side of my own country.
It is in Birmingham, though.
Oh no, the Brummies.
That means
Town.
nothing. That means nothing to me. So.
It's an ex-industrial town in the Midlands. Like, if you think our north is like your south, I guess, and the Midlands is a bit more like your Rust Belt. So, I mean, it's the UK's second largest city, but it has more of a Gary, Indiana sort of feel to it.
Oh no, 'cause Gary, Indiana is like a depressed industrial steel town.
Yeah.
Oh
pretty
well,
much.
I mean that's most of my state, except we're depressed, paper mills that are no longer in business.
Oh well, I mean, it probably smells better there now.
The accent would be a bit impenetrable as well.
I also think that my last so my grandfather originally came from England, and then came over here during World War II, and then just stayed here. And I think my last living English relative lives about 20 minutes from there, if my understanding is correct.
Yeah, that's Birmingham.
So that would also, make the trip even more interesting.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I am not really big on 2-die-20 games. I mean, I may have played one with you, Grim, but I don't remember. That's Fallout was a 2-die-20 game.
Fallout was 2D20, yeah.
Yeah. I can't honestly say whether or not that was good or bad as an experience.
I mean, the game was awesome, but the system you can't comment on.
Yeah, the system I can't comment on just because it's just like I need more dice rolly, combat-y, let's figure out all the chinks and armor and all the nuances and all the really cool stuff that we can do with this system kind of person, which is why I generate a massive number of Fabula Ultima characters going, ooh, this sounds cool, ooh, this sounds cool, ooh, this sounds cool, ooh, this sounds cool. And then we bring out things and Grim goes, Jesus, what did you come up with this time?
But has some 2D20 game caught your eye?
Yes, well, actually, and it's one that most people probably don't have yet, but I'll post it up here. It is Sentience, the robot role-playing game. And I haven't really had a chance to go over it. I mean, I've flipped through the book, and I gotta say the artwork is pretty lackluster. I'm just gonna put that out there. It really is something about the way the light grays and the blues and the and the white skinned robots just kind of, it doesn't seem very exciting.
It looked good when he was showing us the preview stuff.
Oh no, that's a different game. That is Sentience.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and actually, I got news from Ted. Apparently, the books are on the way to his place, and he's going to start shipping them out pretty soon. So I'll have my copy of that we can look at some point. But but no, this is Sentience. It's a 2-die-20.
I have kind of mixed feelings on the whole art thing because I realized about a month ago that I was really getting sucked in by like really interesting looking art and ending up with games I really didn't like. So I'm making an active point to try and like ignore, because like you look at the really old role-playing games and the art wasn't great, but the games are great. And so I am making a point these days to try and ignore the art until after I've looked at the game more thoroughly. Because sometimes it's fun to have something hanging around as an art book, but I already have too much stuff, and I don't want to buy more art books that I'm going to look at once and never again.
Well,
I think a lot of the older art... Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, one of the things I think you'll see in this is the fact that all of the art has kind of a uniform white, gray, blue kind of effect, like this here, this blending in with the background. All this just looks like filtered orange. Even the cover is really not got a whole lot of color to it. It's kind of flat gray with a little bit of blue and stuff. And for some reason, that really detracts, in my opinion, because it's like it's just not interesting. It doesn't make my eye want to seek it out. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm half blind these days anyway, so.
Only half?
So the old artwork was great in a different way. Like they would often pay out big bucks for color plates. Remember them? And the cover art. And the rest would be almost like the kind of stuff you and your own group could doodle in the margins or whatever. And that created a sense of connection, I think. And it was always characters doing stuff in an interesting and exciting way, and you don't get that so much anymore. It's all very posed and washed out pastel colors. I can see what they're going for here: minimalism and clean lines and futuristic, but yeah, I can see why it would get visually uninteresting.
Apparently the whole premise of the game is that humanity kind of got up and left, and it left all the robots behind to take care of everything and terraform it and fix it so that they could come back and reclaim everything. And at some point, the robots all became self-aware. So now you have your little adventures, being self-aware and trying to deal with the whole deal with, trying to terraform the planet for the people to come back and take it all over. Plus whatever corruption has crept into the other robots that are around you. Including, yes, they've apparently invented religion and other stuff. So,
see, I'm always really fascinated by the idea of what I'm fascinated by the idea of sentience in like truly artificial intelligent forms.
Mhm.
I think we made a terrible mistake calling the things we use for pictures AI because it's not.
No, it isn't.
And if Skynet ever shows up someday and they say, oh, like AI has become, sentient, everyone's just going to go, well, yeah, that's AI's been around forever. So what? Well, no, because it's not really AI. What we have now is not AI. But I am one of those people who thinks that, it could theoretically be possible someday. And I'm really interested in what that would look like. And I'm a big Asimov fan.
Same.
And, the idea of what that would look like and how it would take place. So I don't know. I agree with you on the artwork, but the game itself sounds like it might be interesting enough that I think I would. Yeah, exactly. AI's lobotomized cousin.
Yeah.
I'm interested enough in the idea of the game. I think I would enjoy taking a look.
Well, the thing is, it's like nobody wants to call it large language learning forms and all that stuff, which is all it really is. It is fun to play with. It is fun to use. I use it. I enjoy it. I have a good time with it. I play games with it. But it's like every other word that the media has co-opted and overused to the point where it has become meaningless. Kind of like all of the very special insults that get hurled at us whenever we don't like, the latest piece of crap from Star Wars or Marvel or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, that definitely goes on both sides of the aisle on that one. I've already been in one beat down conversation on Twitter this morning. So
wow, you're starting early.
Well, not intentionally. I made the post at 11 o'clock last night and then went to bed and woke up to 16 messages about what a terrible person I was.
Oh, I know that feeling. That's the wonderful thing about social media, where you can put up an semi-innocent post, like just complaining about something that has nothing to do with anything else, like I did when I said my friend of 30-something years that I've been playing, TTRPGs with, showed up to play at my place again, and he kept playing his character in he kept referring to his character in third person instead of, I do this, I do that, And I was getting so irritated with him. I'm like, dude, you're inhabiting your character. There's, stop saying my character is going to go do this. My character is going to do that, because nothing agitates me much more than that, because it breaks immersion. And as soon as I posted that up, I had like 600 or 700 people I'd never even heard of on Twitter just dogpiling me, saying, "Oh, you're a gatekeeper." I'm just kind of like,
yeah, I am a gatekeeper. Gatekeeping keeps out the barbarians.
yeah. Apparently so.
I disagree with you on this one, but then again, I'm not exactly a person who has trouble with any kind of immersion or imagination, and it bothers me when everybody's different. You got this person over here who is first person, this person over here who's trying to act, this person over here who's trying to narrate, it can sometimes be a bit of a nuisance. I don't have a problem with third person role play because I'm watching a scene in my head, and that scene is playing in my head regardless of whether you're describing it from a third person perspective or a first person perspective. But it's still not the kind of thing that you dogpile on, and it sure as hell isn't any kind of gatekeeping.
Exactly. I mean, it's kind of like, you may not agree with me, but that doesn't mean I'm a this, that, or another. It's like, yeah, exactly.
It also doesn't mean you're wrong, because what breaks my immersion and what breaks your immersion are completely different things. I mean, my table and your table are going to be different, and it's because we have different personalities, different triggers, different things that either more vividly paint or more drably wash out our particular images.
Yes, which is why the next game that I run, which is going to be a post-apocalyptic game running using Kevin Crawford's Ashes without number. I'm gonna, of course, Grim will be one of my players, and when their characters all wake up from cryo sleep, they're gonna find out that the world has been invaded by giant feet.
At that point, I quit and stopped playing. I was assaulted this morning by the Doctor Who discourse. But what got me was all these people going, well, I've watched Doctor Who since Christopher Eccleston, so I have all the authority I need to talk about it. I'm like, you poor, dear, sweet summer child.
Yeah.
What are you talking
there was
about? Go away.
You do know there's about 8 doctors before him, right?
Exactly.
Well, and the other thing is that we have totally lost the idea that different people just have different tastes. So I spend a lot of time lately introducing either people who've never gamed before at all, or people who've, want to try new games that in new genres they've never tried before. I'm not going to worry about how they're addressing anything because all I care about is the fact that they're trying something new. But your table isn't my table. I'm certainly not going to tell you how to run your table. And I'm certainly not going to get freaked out because somebody on social media prefers to play a different way than I do. That is such a waste of energy to me.
It's part and parcel of a larger societal issue. We came up with this imaginary, fallacious, just nonsensical idea of my truth versus the truth. And when you started making up my truth, well, this is my truth. Well, your truth is just your opinion. Okay? Your opinion is not truth.
Or perspective, yeah.
Yeah, it's your opinion and your perspective. It is not objective fact. It is not objective truth. And since we've kind of gotten away from the line between fact and opinion has all but been obliterated. And it's also turned into where your opinion is a core part of your identity. So when that's your opinion, here's my opinion, here's why it's different, and here's why we disagree. That's no longer just me talking about your opinion. Now it's a personal attack on your character.
Yeah, people are really their identities are really caught up in, I used to be able to have even really hardcore religious or political conversations with people that I had nothing in common with. But it wasn't about our identities. It was just about what we thought about things. And that was, longer ago than I really want to admit. And nowadays, you can't suggest that running a game differently or liking a different video game without it being a personal attack on someone's active identity. Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Well, getting back to the topic at hand. Look at this. We're 66 pages in and we still don't have character creation rules. So it's setting up all the backstory first. And then, of course, it slaps us with 2 pages of safety mechanics and why we need safety rules. Handling. I'm sorry, 3 pages.
I guess since Far Verona, we do need safety rules for robots.
I mean, because having
So-
a role-playing session of robot sex, which actually doesn't involve genitals, is pretty traumatic to everybody.
Is this safety mechanics like the whole? I can't even remember what they're called.
Safety
The-
tools.
Yeah, okay. I was thinking robots, so I was literally thinking like safety mechanics, like
Well,
them not
that's-
breaking down.
No, that's why they call it safety mechanics instead of safety tools, because they have like lines and veils. Why do we need safety rules? Reading the
I just-
room, signs of discomfort, pausing action, handling
I just-
discomfort, session 0.
I just skipped those chapters on like every game, so it never even occurred to me.
Yeah, I would too. But here we are. We're at what? Sorry.
I think people feel like they have to put them in now, like we used to have to put in. This game will not
This-
turn you into a Satanist. Magic.
I
isn't
was going to
real.
say the satanic
Yeah.
panic stuff. Yeah, I remember that.
This
Or
is-
or the obligatories, like if you've never played a role playing game.
Yeah. This likely isn't going to be your first one, but here's a whole waste of pages because I have a word count to hit.
I don't know. I disagree with that. I think you should always write your book as if the person who is reading it has never seen anything else ever before that has anything to do with it. And I'm working on my game's rule book. I've been working on it for the past several months, and I intentionally went out and got a beta reader who is a mother of 2 teenage children who has absolutely no interest in this whatsoever, just so I can hand her the book and say, read this and tell me if you understand this game, you know how to play it, and it makes sense to you, and you get the idea of how to run it. You should never write your project. Don't use somebody else's homework. So,
Well,
And and Dostoevsky should start as a chewable ABC book for babies, and then gradually teach you to read, and then.
I think
no, come on.
I
You know are you in the Bro SR now, or are we just making the damn Scarecrow factory here pumping out the straw
I
man?
just think it's a real thing that most people are not going to pick up your indie RPG as the first thing they play, and it is safe, I think, to operate under the assumption that people know some stuff about role playing coming in.
Yeah.
So unless you're a D&D or a second tier game, I don't think you really have to waste too much time on all that.
I think you're right, but I also think that look at the flip side of it. I'm an indie RPG. All right, D&D is going to sell X million copies regardless. They can put out a picture book that has little pop-ups in it and no rules whatsoever, and just tells me that the orcs are Mexican and they're going to sell 1 million copies. Me, as my indie RPG, if I get 1 or 2 additional sales because somebody picks up a book off of a shelf at a game store and says, that looks fun and I can figure this out, that's a force multiplier, even if it's just a few extra copies.
Yeah. What were you trying to say, Go?
Well, I think it makes a difference too, because I did an edit recently for a game called Pretend, which is specifically aimed at like teenagers who are having, emotional difficulties in school. It's designed for teachers to teach teenagers to role play in an attempt to give them better social skills and more team building. That game absolutely had to have everything about role playing, because the teachers probably weren't going to know what the heck role playing was, and many of the teenagers probably weren't. And the person who wrote it kind of had the same idea. Well, everybody knows, what dice rolls look like, and everybody knows. I was like, well, no, they don't, because you're probably going to be looking at, some of the teachers at least are going to be older. Some of the parents are going to want to know what this stuff is. And I think, like in that case in particular, you really needed some of that extra information. But then there are others that you're right, you really don't. Most horror role-playing games, especially, most good horror, Cult should not be anyone's first role-playing game. And it specifically says on the front, like, not for anyone under 16, you should probably be familiar with role-playing.
Or, you could just be that guy who decides to run a serious game of Fatal down there at the youth center.
And I would make I would make this argument as opposed to the leave it out argument. If you are, say, Cult, you're doing some Divinity Law stuff over here, it's not meant to be your first anyway. a paragraph that says, hey, this is the gaming philosophy that went into how I wrote this game. This is what this system is designed to produce and promote, is more than enough, but it's still there and it's still a refresher and a reminder, and it's a paragraph. Whereas if you want something that has more appeal or is more designed to be universal, so to speak, then you get a couple of pages of here's how a game session looks with an example, here's what D4 means, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, anyway, just kind of to put everything into perspective.
Resentment can grow quietly without much warning after a storm. Mushrooms can too. Shiitake?
So anyway, we're 73 pages into this out of a 220-page book before we finally hit character creation, which in my opinion is terrible.
Well,
Because the first thing I do when I grab any of these role-playing books, first off, I get a hardback because, yeah, I hate using PDFs. But the first thing I do is go straight to character creation and say, let's get a character together. I already know I want to play the game because I was interested enough to learn about the setting, enough to buy it. So I really don't want to get that deep into the setting yet, because we're going to do that in a game. But I got to know how to build my character. I got to know all the nuances of it. So that's the first thing I try to do, is build a character. And if I can't build a character, that pretty much is my litmus test for whether or not this is going to be a decent game or a playable game or a game that I'm just going to be like, well, that was a nice waste of money. I can go throw this in my closet now and forget about it.
It's interesting. Character creation is like one of the last things I do.
What?
Well, first of all, I run more than anything else, so I care
Oh.
about the world far more than I do the character creation. Character creation for me mainly is, am I going to have to run pre-gens, or can I get my people to focus? And I love the worlds because even if I don't end up playing that particular game, they often have things I can include in other games. I'm trying to find... Grim, are you familiar with Knight? You would
Not
probably be
offhand.
more... It's a French game that is apparently quite popular, and I have a great deal of interest in, except they only just released like one book in English that I can actually access. So, but I think it's been in Europe for quite a lot longer. Their character generation does not start until page 109.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Knight mentioned.
Opinions divided really in the design community. I think it depends on the project. If your world is really alien and different and complicated, then you probably want to front load with that so that people can get immersed in the world and then figure out what kind of character they want to play. If your game is something more generic, perhaps, like it's an action film game or a fantasy game or a science fiction game, then you can probably start with the character creation mechanics, because that does tend to get people excited and invested and figuring out what the possibilities of character creation are that they can tap into.
I think D&D has given people the idea that the game masters are going to almost always be the person buying the book, or at least the first book. And that's why character generation is no longer up in front in all of them anymore, because you got to get the game master interested more than you've got to get the players interested.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's more, I don't think it's necessarily the game master is going to be the one buying the books the most. I think it's more along the lines of most of them have come to the assumption, and it's not incorrect, that in general, most players are going to be taught how to play by a game master. So it's almost like a teacher's manual for showing them how to play. But I think character creation probably belongs up front. You know, brief synopsis of what you got going on, style, that sort of thing. You know, real overview of what you're going to find, and then character creation. Because I'm like, let's start at the beginning. What's the first thing you're going to do as somebody who's going to play this game? You're going to roll a character. You're going to create your character. So let's start with that. I still, and will argue this until I'm blue in the face, probably if not the best, definitely on the short list for the best laid out core rule books are the 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons core rule books, especially the Player's Handbook. It walks you right through being a player in the game, and it lives up to its name. You know, each chapter is in order of what you're going to do.
The idea of having separate players' books is a good one, but I mean, even D&D, the player's guide isn't really the player's guide; it's the rules guide, and then the Games Master's book is additional advice and support, and the Monster Manual is monsters. But a few games have tried to do like separate, like player-facing pamphlets or whatever that only contain the character creation rules and a quick rules summary, but it never seems to take off. I don't really know why. You would think having a slimmer, cheaper volume that players can buy would mean more sales, more accessibility, less handing the book around and referring to it at the table, things like that. But it never seems to really take off.
Well, that's because we just said a minute ago, it's not players who drive what new games get played. Let's face it, you don't walk in and everybody, man, I saw such and such on X. I mean, this new game is so awesome. We want to play this game. That's not how it works. The game master walks in and says, hey, I was interested. You know, I checked out Call of Cthulhu. And how would you guys like to play a cool, you know, investigation adventure? How would you guys like to play Adult Scooby-Doo with Cthulhu? You know, that's how new systems get introduced. They get introduced by the people who are going to run the game. And if you're a game master and you're looking at, damn it, there's this indie game and I'd like to support it and it's cool and all, but I mean, shit, 3 more books. I don't want to shell out, you know, $25 a pop for 3 more books on something I've got no idea about. And I'll buy Grimm's game over here that only has 1 book. At least then, if I don't like it, I only bought 1 book.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Grimm's book, if you're talking about Machinations of the Space Princess, it doesn't have a whole lot of setting stuff in it because, you know, he really leaves it open for you to build the kind of universe you want to, although it's pretty heavily implied that everything is supposed to be kind of that heavy metal sort of sleazy universe, which is great because I love that as an idea.
Speaking of this, the concept behind this game that we've been paging through seems very similar to Charles Stross's Saturn's Children, but with all the fun parts taken out of it.
I hated that book. Oh,
why?
Because he would come to some good parts, and then he would try to do some clever crap like chibi dwarves. That's the dumbest shit I've ever heard of in my entire. I mean, chibi dwarves.
I thought it was interesting, and it played with this idea of robots being left behind after humans have disappeared or gone extinct or whatever.
Yeah.
So the robots that were more humanoid, so the gynoids and the androids, became like a ruling caste because robots were all programmed to serve humans, and they were the closest thing to humans that were left. And there was that sect of robots that was trying to breed chimpanzees to make them more like humans so that they could recreate humans so that they would have someone to serve. God damn it. It had a lot of interesting ideas, but I guess it was a bit scattershot. But this strikes me as being similar to that, but all the fun parts have been sucked out of it.
Well, I mean, from the fact of it is, it's like, yeah, it's you're left behind on a wasted planet that everybody is busy trying to terraform. You know, you at some point your robot character started to develop self-awareness because they started missing humans and feeling lonely and upset, and then just inexplicably started taking on all the worst traits of humans as well as all the best traits. And so that's why you have things like an emotional score and all these other things that determine kind of how you act and all this backstory. It's actually a pretty good character generation system once you actually get to it. But yeah, I just, if it had been me, I would have done it a little bit differently. I'd have put like a little snippet about what the world was like at the front, and then just threw in my character creation, and then thrown in all the big world building chunk at the, closer to the back. But that's just how I do things. But, your mileage may vary. One thing is kind of nice is even though it does seem to have an impressive array of weaponry and stuff in it, and most likely your veteran players are gonna try to look for the biggest weapon they can find with the most amount of damage and the most amount of extra whatever, like, oh look, this one is a shot with 4+, and the game doesn't seem to be focused around that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, robots murdering each other is a terrible waste of resources.
It is, but I mean, when you consider every single person that's left on the world is a resource to be recycled, it's kind of like, you have outlived your usefulness. It is time for you to be recycled.
I feel like you could get into some really dark, like, robotic Soylent Green going on here.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you could, I think. I mean, if that's the way you wanted to go with it. My
first game mention was cult, so I think that gives us some idea of my running style.
I have all the cult books over here. Somebody has already offered me a tidy sum of money for them, and I may just end up having to take them up on it because I don't think at this point I'll ever get a chance to play it.
Are they the early editions or the like?
Yeah, it's the very first editions that came out back in the 90s.
Oh, those are the really good ones.
Aw. That's why they want to offer me a tidy sum of money for it.
I mean, if I had a tidy sum of money, I would totally offer you a tidy sum of money for them. So.
Oh, I could use a tidy sum of money. Just sell some goats.
But tidy is relative, isn't it?
Yeah, tidy is relative. It's like, is it one car payment or is it 2 car payments? At this point, because that's all I'm looking at money in the terms of. Is like, can I make this car payment? Because I've only got 70 more to go.
Well, if you swap the books for a pair of goats, then you will end up with more goats, and you can rent them out to eat people's lawns and sell them milk.
Yeah, I'm sure that would work.
If he wants to swap me a pair of goats for them, sure.
If I lived on a farm, unfortunately, I live in the city, so they're really right. They love it when we grow gardens and try to have more than a certain number of animals in our.
It's all right. Goats will eat anything, including health inspectors.
But there's also the fact that no one ever complains about dogs in the city, and yet my dog outweighs a pair of goats easily. And the goats make less noise.
I got to harp on this pair of goats in a dog costume.
I got to harp on this art style once more. I know you're probably getting sick of it, but a lot of these pictures of these little robots I'm seeing in the corners are early to late 3D models. And I know this because I own them myself.
I was going to say that looks like a badly painted BattleTech mech.
It's a 3D model. And the thing is, normally they render up pretty well, but somebody has clearly taken the time to render this and then re-scheme it in the blue, gray, and white and black format of 4 colors, which this whole book seems to have. So a decision was made to make everything in this book black, gray, white, and blue.
When was the book? When was the game made?
This year.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Because it looks like there was the Steven Spielberg movie
2025.
there, and then there was the Will Smith movie, and those robots were all white. And there was a third one that had a very similar style where everything was in white and blue. So I suspect someone was affected by movie graphics a lot.
You're talking about AI. You're talking about iRobot. You're talking about probably Vice and Automata and not
No,
Ex
the Robin-
Machina so much.
The Robin
Oh.
Williams one.
Bicentennial Man.
Yeah. Like they all had a very similar aesthetic in a lot of ways in the marketing.
Yeah, but all those
So-
movies were like, almost 30 years ago.
Yeah, but I feel like somebody before they wrote this sat down and binged all those movies to,
I
stay
suspect
inspired.
if we get to the end of this thing, we can look and see if they've got like a
Wall-E
source.
as well.
Wall-E, yeah. And as you can see, by the way, it is a Modifius product. So there's that. Let's just jump to the back really quick. Yeah, see, even the back cover is going to look that way.
And
And
yet
this yellow
suddenly-
hand.
Suddenly we've gone to like green instead of blue. I wonder
No,
why.
it's all blue still. It's
it?
just the shades. Yeah, it's just shades.
His torso looks green on my screen.
It's blue. This Yellow Hand Publishing is a kind of like a new breed of publishers, and I've heard a little bit about them, so that's pretty cool. I would have loved to have spoken to these people if I had a chance before this came out. But yeah, here's all the other stuff they've done, like Once Upon, Draconica, Sentience, Ashland, Tales of Menace and Mystery, Monster of the Week, and their Call of Cthulhu scenarios. It's kind of like, I've never heard of any of these others, but have you?
Nope. I think so.
Okay. There's their character sheet in blue.
Monster of the Week does sound like it should be it came from the Late Late Show kind of.
It
Or a Buffy and
It
Angel
actually-
homage.
yeah, well, Monster of the Week used to be a thing for 3.0, 3.5. Somebody used to put out like a weekly monster thing. Yeah. Kickstarter backers. Where am I in there? Am I in there? Let me see.
Jonathan, Modifius is synonymous with 2D20, and they did release the 2D20 Conan line.
Mm-hmm.
Though they
Haven't they
lost
done
a
some
lot.
other 2-die-20? Oh yeah, Fallout is 2-die-20 also.
Fallout. They did the Barsoom RPG, the John Carter of Mars thing. What else of theirs have I got? Not a lot, actually.
Oh wow, the Neuroscape trading card game apparently backed this. I shouldn't say I'm surprised.
Didn't they do Discworld?
They are doing Discworld, but that's not a 2D20 game. It's a very rules light story game. Not dissimilar to the way I approached it when I did a fan game on Discworld. So, yeah.
I just had vague memories of hearing the names connected in some way, shape, or form.
And look, they've got an index. They automatically get a +1 from me for an index.
Every time
and they
you
did-
say something like they've got an index, wow, that's a big plus, or they've got a table of contents, wow, that's a plus. I know it's not, but it just to me is like this is just another dig at Clown Door.
Well, not
Wow, they
specifically.
got page numbers. There's page numbers.
I mean, not specifically, but I mean, that's always been one of my things is, does it have an index? Does it have a bookmark? Because I'm a GM and I'm sitting here at a table with this book and I'm trying to find stuff, flipping through the pages because, the players have asked me something that wasn't obvious, like, what is the price of deep fried tofu in this world? And I'm like, well, shit, now I got to go look this up. And,
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that has become more of a problem because we've gotten into this PDF world where a lot of stuff just gets hyperlinked all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they rely on Control F to be their index.
Well, I mean, you'd have to ask Grim more about this than I, but I could tell you one thing is when we were playing Lone Wolf Fists, I know I was struggling just through character creation, but also it's like whenever we were trying to look up rules, it was kind of like, I wish I had an index.
Yeah. Some people put a really over-the-top contents at the front that is kind of halfway between a contents and an index. I hate that. I would much rather have all the terms divided out in a proper index to look up, because I can just look up the thing rather than the section and then scroll through it for the thing.
So I like Numenera a lot, but I hate their index because it's a 2-book set and the index covers both books no matter which book you're looking at. So what I tend to ignore the index, and instead they have these conveniently colored like tabs on the side of the page. And I know, this color is what I need for this information and this color is what I need for this information, and I just ignore the index completely.
Okay. This picture aggravates me in more ways than one because it has no depth and it's very clearly copy-pasted assets on top of each other, which speaks to laziness to me.
Yeah, they've paid virtually nothing for artwork for this.
Uh-huh. The map looked good, but I mean, they reuse a bunch of these assets over and over and over throughout the book, and I'm just kind of like, it's modifious.
They
That's
also
back in
did.
this thing.
They also did the bad version of Cult. So
Point. And
I think they were only a fulfillment house for that, in fairness to them.
yeah, that's true. Didn't Modifius also do Vampire version 5?
Again, just distribution in the UK, I think.
So you don't like the art, and you don't like where the character creation is located. Is there anything you do like about it?
I like the fact that it's an interesting idea. It is an interesting... I mean, I backed it, and I bought it, so obviously there was enough here to interest me in wanting to check it out, to see if it had any legs for playing. And, I've said this to Raven C.S. McCracken to his face, because I love the dude, I really do. But years ago, when I bought World of Cinnabar, he had all his character creation stuff up in the front of the book, and try as I might, I could not figure out character creation, so I could never successfully build a character. Therefore, I could never run a game of it or play a game of it. However, his world building was so cool and so in-depth. I mean, it's just like you could sit there and read pages and pages and pages of details on all the different races, on all the different parts of, the world ship and everything else, and the gods and how cool they were. And it had so many pop culture references and things. It's like I told him, I said, even though I didn't ever really get to play your game because I couldn't figure it out, the world was so cool, and I cribbed a lot of notes from it for some of my games because it was such a neat world. And it's the same thing I approach with almost every game. It's kind of like, okay, I'm interested in the setting. I'm interested in the, the mechanics, whatever. I don't usually see the mechanics up front. I see the setting. And if the setting grabs me, I get the book, because I figure at the worst case scenario, if the game is garbage itself, mechanic wise, I might be able to crib some ideas from the setting that I want to use for my own games. So there is that. And in the case of this one in particular, it was kind of funny because we spoke to the creator of another game called Sentience. Not Sentience. And they were kickstarting at the same time. So that's why I even heard about this one, is because, Ted mentioned, it's like, we're not to be confused with the other game, this 2die20 game, Sentience. And so I said, okay, so they got 2 robot books 2 robot role-playing games coming out at the same time. I'm curious to see where they're going to be different, how they're going to be the same, if they're going to be interesting, and if I can crib notes from one to use in the other. Whichever system I like better.
I think that's what I was saying earlier, was that I'm trying to not get so caught up in the artwork, because it's pretty rare I buy a game where there isn't something I can use in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And I mean, artwork isn't everything, but
I'm just struck by how much of the artwork in this is like old poser assets and things.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Which looked pretty cheap when it was new, and was being overused badly in a lot of games. So to have that in a book in the year of our Lord 2025 is a bit of a I don't know. It's something.
I mean, here's the funny part. This is the thing that kind of makes me laugh about the whole thing. Is it's kind of like, it's called Sentience. It's a book about AI. So why didn't they just use AI generated art? That would have actually fit.
It would have made a statement, but I expect it would have cost them a lot of sales.
Yeah, possibly so. Everybody has this insane hatred for AI art and AI. Well, AI writing I can understand, but even though it is helpful in certain things, it's just like, I've played with some of that stuff a little bit, and it's like, I've typed out a simple phrase of dialogue, then put it through, a chat GPT filter and told it, hey, can you punch this up to be more noir? Can you punch this up to be more, can you punch this up to turn it into Cockney rhyming speak? Yes, I've done that. And yeah, I've done that. And it'll come back, and it's just like, where I had like maybe 2 or 3 sentences, it'll come back with an entire paragraph with nuances and quotes and all this other stuff. And I'm just kind of like, wow. I could understand why people would get so addicted and so dependent on using it to write all their stuff. And it's scary.
It's a tool like any other.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And it's like, you can be over reliant on a tool or have the wrong tool in any number of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
My fear, so I don't have the anti-AI anything the way some people do. My fear is that, and I think this was another thing we discussed earlier, is that if everybody's writing with Grammarly, everything starts to sound the same. Because Grammarly is always going to make
default.
the same types of changes. And my other fear is that, so I have made a point of trying to get away from my phone for 24 hours a week, just so that I can stay remotely sane and get things done. And it has been astonishingly difficult to do, despite the fact that I loathe my phone with a passion. And yes, it's a tool, but we're getting to the point where it seems to be so hard for people to learn to do things without those tools. And, I've always thought it was important to, learn the basics and the groundwork for something before you start making it easier. And just, it's sort of like the English language itself. You have to know what the rules are before you can figure out where and when to break them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's kind of like what a lot of us say is, you got to run it rules as written before you start making changes in the game, because you got to see how it plays and how it flows before you modify it. It's like, you got to buy the car stock off the lot before you start, adding, superchargers and, dropping, a new transmission in there and all that other stuff.
It's one of those things. Like, I don't think you necessarily need to run a game rules as written, but what you do need to you have to understand it and understand why you need to understand why before you start screwing with stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This is this is political small p, like not actually dealing with any party or anything, but there was always an example of the difference between small c conservative behavior and small l liberal behavior, which was you got a fence across the road. Are you going to cross the fence? Liberal says there's a fence here, it's in my way, tear it down. We'll find out why it's there later because it's faster for me to just tear the fence down. Conservative says, you know what, I should probably figure out why this fence is here before I mess with it. Every now and then the conservative is late to the party because he spent time figuring out about the fence. Every now and then the liberal gets run over by a bull because he tore the damn fence down without knowing why it was there in the first place.
Uh-huh.
So it's the same kind of deal. You shouldn't go screwing around with rules and systems and stuff until you at least understand why a mechanic happens to be there. Because you make a change in how a mechanic works, because 9 times out of 10 when your party comes across something, it works cleaner or makes more sense. But then you come across in game that one or that slightly different scenario, which is why the mechanic was the way it was, and your whole thing is screwed up and nothing works. And why? Well, that's the reason why you didn't change that mechanic to begin with. It was set up that way for these edge cases.
Yeah, can you imagine the magic item creatum system in Pathfinder in 3.0, 3.5 if they didn't have a gold piece requirement?
Oh, yeah.
that would get out of control quick.
Way out of control. Or if you didn't have some of the other limitations on them, like the biggest one I can think of, and it gets hand waved away way too often, and then people cry about 3.5 being broken, is they start waving away what bonuses can stack. Like in particular, magical bonuses and stuff, and which ones are you take the higher of the two, and which ones stack. It's like, well, my AC's 90. No, your AC is 27.
It's still too high, but yeah.
Of course, sometimes someone builds a fence across an animal's migratory path and it needs to be torn down, or someone makes an illegal claim on the commons and you need to tear it down. So,
But once again, that's an understanding of the rules and the situations before you do it.
Right, and we had this experience with Zombicide Chronicles, which I ran rules as written, and after a couple of sessions, it's like we stopped, but the players were really, really frustrated because the game had a mechanic in place where you don't actually, start from your starting point and then have to travel through all the city and whatever to reach whatever it is. It's just like you play like a little mini game of what happens to you on your way to the objective. And nobody liked that.
No.
Everybody would have rather have played the journey from beginning to end.
Yeah, it just didn't make sense, and it reduced any encounter that you had to a single skill roll, which wasn't involving at all. Didn't have any story aspect to it.
Exactly, and that's if I ran it again, I would definitely take that out. Although, I mean, otherwise, the Zombicide rules were not bad. I mean, as far as the combats and everything went, they were fun and kind of smooth, I think. There is kind of a tendency I have noticed in modern role-playing games, and I've said this sometime in the past, that to me it seems like a lot of games now have mechanics set up to where monsters will either randomly or automatically generate attacks, and it becomes the players who choose whether or not they wish to, who wants to take the attack, who wants to get the damage dealt to them and whatever. And I think that's largely because it's a case of we want to eliminate a lot of the blame that players throw on GMs for whenever character death happens or when characters get incapacitated and that sort of stuff. Well, maybe that's just my perception. But
so we create a system that's idiotic.
That's what rules are for in the first place, and that's why I think a lot of narrative games fail, is because there is nothing for you to hide behind. As the games master, you have to have deliberately chosen to take out a character rather than it being, the luck of the dice or whatever else.
Yeah, and in like Zombicide's case, the zombies are going to do a set number of attacks, and it's the player's choice as to who takes them. I, as a GM, I don't assign the zombies. I just tell you, it's like, okay, you're facing 5 zombies. They're all going to attack, and they're all going to do 1 point of damage if they hit. So who is going, you guys decide amongst yourself who is taking hits and if you're going to dodge or whatever. And then the players figure out how much damage all their characters are going to take as, as a group. So it becomes a case of, it's not 5 zombies dogpiling one character unless that's what the characters choose.
That's so stupid. It's so idiotic. Yeah, let's just cut out the middleman and have group HP.
Well,
so, the whole group has HP, and when it gets to 0, everybody dies.
Well, I was just going to say that's how Tunnels and Trolls worked. It's group HP, and you divided out how you wanted to amongst the individual characters. So this goes way back. Really.
So that's an old concept, but I don't think it's a bad one necessarily. I mean, like I said, it does kind of take a lot of the it takes a lot of the sting out of being defeated, because I mean, okay, let's say I'm running a regular, not necessarily D&D, but an OSR game. Every single round, I have to choose what the monsters are going to be doing, and I try to make it kind of natural and plausible as to their intelligence level and what's happening to them on the battlefield. So if they see some dude is in the back healing everybody, that's going to be their priority, because they're kind of like, hey, if we don't take this guy out, he's going to keep the other guys alive, or they're going to keep killing us. Or if there's a guy in the back who's throwing spells, we need to kill that guy first because he's way too dangerous and he might kill all of us if we don't take him out. We might survive to be able to run away from, the big fat fighter in his armor, but we're not going to survive some dude shooting fireballs at us.
Well,
and so,
imagine that.
Let me finish my show. So what happens is like, if, I send the bad guys over there, and they start beating down the mage, and the mage gets pissed off because, he's only got 12 hit points or something like that. And you got 8 or 9 goblins or orcs beating the shit out of him. He goes down. Now that player's pissed off at you all night. Well, you singled me out. And I'm like, but that's what they would do. You would do it. If you were fighting a group of opponents and you saw somebody healing or casting, you would go after them too. You would prioritize targets just like they would. They're not that stupid. And it becomes go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say I'm really fond of the book The Monsters Know What They're Doing.
Because they do. I mean, some of them have enough. Some of those monsters you fight are genius levels and stuff like that. It's like they can already pre-game encounters to have contingencies set up, and the players feel like, oh, well, this is totally unfair. We weren't prepared for this. Well, guess what? The bad guy was prepared for you.
Get good.
Yeah, that was one of the cool things about the 3.5 Monster Manual, which was not in the 3rd edition Monster Manual. Was in the 3.5 Monster Manual when you had of course, the second I unmute my microphone, somebody drives by with an empty trailer. If you had like a Rakshasa or like a super intelligent demon or a mind flayer or something, it would have like a common tactics section where it would spell out the way, things they would do in round 1 and round 2 before combat. If they're unnoticed, if unnoticed, they'll use this. If the players are aware of them, they'll use this to kind of help you. The age-old question, my character has a 16 or an 18 intelligence and mine's 10. So, answering that for you. So, that was great. And, I of course, 100% agree with you in the entirety of what you said as far as the behaving like intelligent creatures like they should. But, look at it from a completely different perspective. Let's look at the easy encounter. And imagine playing Cyberpunk.
Mm-hmm.
And you got some throwaway encounter where we all walk outside of the bar and, some street punks come in. How lame and how much of the gritty, just gutter trash realism, the world is here to screw you over feeling you're supposed to have from Cyberpunk goes away when, hey, that guy just got really bad rolls with that switchblade and your fixer just got stabbed in the liver and is now dying in the street. That is completely gone. Was like, well, I think I'm going to put that damage on this guy over here who has, this guy over here's got a linear frame that, doubles his body. So we're going to actually have that hit him instead. So he just gets poked in the gears, and then we turn around and smash these punks, and he pulls out a wrench and we're fine.
Mm-hmm. And it does establish a different kind of a play style between different games. It's like, yeah, if you have a game where the players are the ones who are responsible for assigning all their own damage from enemies, then yeah, it slightly becomes a little bit more of a heroic style game, because it's kind of like, since you're the one who's determining the outcomes and your characters are the ones who are going first all the time in every single combat, it's up to you how you choose to engage with the creatures. It's not adversarial. It's just like, I'm just putting down obstacles for you to deal with. How you deal with them is honestly up to you, because these things are going to do this every single round anyway. If you're going to be standing around and get dumb enough to get hit with it, you might as well figure out what the best way to get hit with it is.
What do you think,
does kind of,
as a herd animal? What do you think?
Yeah. Goat.
Unless you stepped. You back? Hello.
Did you
Yeah.
hear the question?
I heard part of it, but there was a blink in there. I was trying to see if I could figure out the context of the missing word, and obviously failed.
All of this approach, whether player groups should be considered as groups rather than individuals, whether baddies should act smartly in ways that might piss off the players.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it really depends on the game. I mean, you're ending up with, if you're doing something like Paranoia, where the other players are pretty much the biggest danger, then having team hit points definitely is not going to work.
No.
If you're playing certain fantasy games, maybe. But I'm not. I don't know. I don't think it would work well for my table, because problem solving and planning and puzzles are a really big part of most of my games. And if one player does something really stupid, I don't think the entire group should be penalized for it. I always say I don't kill players, but I don't stop them from killing themselves.
Yeah. That's how I like to approach it.
That's my general theory. And they always say, then how come so many of us die in your games? And I'm like, because you won't stop doing dumb things.
Well, okay. And let me give you a perfect example. This has actually happened to me. And I got 3 people here who are GMs, and I've got like 34 people out there watching who could listen to this and comment on it. So please do. But I ran a Hyperborea game, which Hyperborea is pretty similar to AD&D in a lot of ways, but kind of better in some ways. And I know the Bro SR are probably going to come out of the woodwork to tell me I'm full of shit, but be that as it may. The characters are all first levels. There's 3 of us, and they decide to join a caravan that's traveling along. Well, I determined that the caravan is going to get attacked by a number of raiders, and I generate, I think it was like 12 barbarian raiders, and each one of them is like, between level 1 and level 2 and level 3, right? Because they're various types. I let the players make skill checks ahead of time to detect that this was, they were entering an area where raiders had been ambushing caravans, right? So they knew this was a dangerous area. I also gave them time to notice that there were raiders on their way to attack the caravan, because they saw them coming, I think. They had 3 turns in which to do something before the raiders actually arrived to attack the caravan. They didn't do anything, or I think they just were, milling around, or I don't remember exactly what they were doing, but it wasn't anything like taking defensive cover, hiding, or anything else. They just kind of stood there and waited for stuff to come into range. I said, okay, so you're just going to wait for the enemies to come into range. So they did. And as soon as the first, enemies came into range, I told them, I was like, okay, they're not armed with any missile weapons. So you've got 2 rounds of, attacks before, they can reach you to melee with your longest weapon. So of course they took attacks on the barbarians. They didn't kill them because, they're first levels. And they couldn't do enough damage, or they were missing. I then determined a certain amount of the raiders were going to be attacking the caravan and the caravan guards, which would leave like 2 raiders apiece for each PC. At this point, they decided to stand and fight. So guess what happened?
They all got their just desserts and had to roll new characters.
One of the characters straight up died. The other 2 went down, and I determined, okay, the only reason the one guy died is because he got critically hit. And he literally took like so much damage from one hit that it just destroyed it blew right through his constitution and everything else. I'm like, there's no way he survived that. The other 2 were beaten down to 0 hit points, captured, and taken back to the raiders' camp, as hostages or slaves or whatever. Those players were pissed off at me so bad.
You need better players.
They never wanted to play it again.
You need better better players.
Well, and see, this is the thing. These are players. These are players who have been playing D&D and various other role-playing games of all types since the 70s.
Well, this goes back to what I've always said about the sphere of annihilation in the front of the Tomb of Horrors.
Uh-huh.
This comes from people approaching how their characters behave as a game instead of as I don't want to get hit with a sword because I'm a person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I've been playing a long time, not since the 70s, but a long time.
Uh-huh.
And I can remember when the assumption was making it to level 5 was going to be a really big deal.
Oh, yeah.
Like, dying early and dying often was really common, and making it to level 5 was, like, celebratory. And in 5e, one of the reasons that I won't run 5e is that the assumption is that if they so much as take a hit, it's the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And the players I do have that I have played with for a very long time, they can play any other system and they're totally fine. They're mature about it. If they die, if they make a mistake, they admit it. But you get them into a 5e game and instantaneously they all become whiny bitches.
Mm-hmm.
And there just seems to be something about the assumptions now. Like, somebody made a comment about players in D&D being superheroes. And I was like, but they never used to be superheroes. They were heroes. They were heroic, but they weren't superheroes. They were just people who happened to be, really athletic. Like, you didn't start as superheroes. Like, you weren't level 1 and you were Superman.
Yeah.
Like, you were level 1 and you were just a guy who could, swing a sword pretty well.
I'd take it a step. Well, in the older editions, I'd agree with that. I'd take it a step above that. This is how I'd explain it to my 3.5 people, and I think I do have a little interesting thing I could put forward on this, because I did have a little hiatus where I wasn't running games for several years, and I noticed a distinct difference when I came back from when I left. And I always told people, I'm like, here's what 3.5 is. A first level PC is like an Olympian. Okay. They are really world class in their abilities, compared to the general population. They're going out to challenge things that are more than that. So compared to average commoner Joe or even Town Guard B, you're already elite. But compared to Goblin, Troll, Ogre, that sort of thing, those Ogre slaughters Town Guards because Town Guards are, one hit and can't even, he has to roll a 1 to miss them. You, on the other hand, have a chance. And I came back, and like when I left, I didn't have this problem. When I came back, I started doing this thing where when I'm running a new game and I bring up a world, I tell people, I'm like, okay, guys, I want you to understand how this world is populated. Characters who are over level 3 make up less than 1% of the population. Okay? Almost the entire population of the world is level 1 or below. You're the exception. You're not the rule. And so when you ask me, for instance, I want to go to the magic item shop and buy a magic weapon. I'm like, really?
Oh.
This is a small town. This is a small village. You think one of the 0.0001% of characters capable of forging a +1 sword happens to be in this tiny ass village?
Oh yeah, like Farmer Grimm is in there behind he just pulls out his holy defender from behind his row of cabbages and says, "Here you go."
We're really hoping that some wizard decided to retire to this little place for his summer home.
Well, I
just happened to have brought my whole laboratory with me.
And,
he decided to retire and start a building business manufacturing shit that nobody can afford.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's like the GDP of this village for the next decade can't buy a +1 sword, yet he has a +4 Vorpal longsword hanging up on the fucking shelf, and he can turn around and he can
just
buy
have a holy defender that somebody had to hawk off to get resurrected.
Oh yeah, and he's like, you can don't worry, just bring in those 14 carts of gear that you looted off of everything. We're gonna buy all of that stuff. We've got 40,000 gold sitting in the cash register in this village of 10 people that all have a annual income of half a gold piece.
Khajiit is running special on cloaks of elvenkind this week. Buy one, get one free.
But they, people also forget that in early D&D, a level 1 wizard had a 25% chance of being able to one one-shotted by a house cat.
We called them gusher mages because we figured it's like wizards and first edition D&D had such super duper high blood pressure that like if they cut themselves like on a sliver or something like that, their entire blood supply just went swoosh like a fire hose.
Yes, we call it.
No, they just have Russian royal blood. They're all descendant from Queen Victoria.
It was one of the reasons I used to like the early Dragonlance books is that Raceland at least had a rational reason for why he was so weak at like level 1. Because he was born as an incredibly sickly kid and was on the verge of death all the time anyway. And it was a really good reason as to why the rest of the party would, keep him around because they liked his brother and his brother, kept him safe. And it really doesn't make sense in a lot of other scenarios.
Well, see, this is something I had to keep pointing out to players all the time. It's like, I kept trying to tell my group, it's like, hey guys, you realize that the average human beings only have a 9 or a 10 in any stat. And that became even more crucial in 3.0, 3.5. I said, because look, a 10 is a 0 in all your, ability modifiers. And a 9 is like a -1. I said, that's the average. And they kept trying to tell me, no, 12 is. I'm like, no, it isn't. Because if everybody was above average and stuff, then everybody would be kind of exceptional. But I said, but here you are swaggering around with like 18s and 17s and 16s and 15s and 14s. And you're bitching about how you're not strong enough, more powerful enough. And everything else. I'm like, to the average person, you're a god. You're like Captain America next to a regular dude.
Yeah, you're Hercules, if not an actual god.
Yeah. But they just wouldn't believe me because, the stats were such an important part of 3.0.
Well, and the 3.0 books explicitly state that 12 is above average. Like it even tells you that 18. Like look at the monsters that have 18s as their baseline. It's like really the everybody runs around with the strength of a hill giant.
No, they shouldn't.
No, I mean a hill giant. We have real life hill giants. We do. They're real life hill giants. They have names like Brian Shaw and Eddie Hall, and they get paid big money to pick up giant rocks and haul 18-wheelers around.
The funny thing is, Eddie Hall can't beat an MMA fighter, but that's beside the point.
True.
Very
But
different.
you know what Eddie Hall
strength,
can
though.
beat? A really heavy rock.
Yep.
Well,
yeah,
and
I mean,
I think the point is supposed to be like in D&D, a hill giant isn't necessarily a skilled fighter. They're just really good at, throwing things around.
yeah, they're just big, and if they hit you, they will crush you into paste if they manage.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a point that bringing up Raceland definitely 100% highlights this. And this just kind of goes back to, you can kind of see my philosophy on what attracted me to these games in the first place. And I think this actually makes sense if you're one of these people who was like me and like a lot of us, because we're all older here, that were attracted to these games from reading these books, reading fantasy stories and things of that nature, reading pulp, as opposed to attracted from playing Skyrim or something. And that is that I tell people, I'm like, oh, I'm going to re-roll these stats. I had a 7.
Yeah.
But okay, you also had, 2 14s and a 16. And you're mad because you got a 7 and a couple of 10s. How about instead, part of what makes your character interesting is that they can overcome some of these less than awesome stats. Like, I mean, do you all want to be Superman? Because the only way Superman is any fun is if every single enemy cheeses the hell out of you. Because Superman is limitless. Nobody can beat Superman. He's invincible in just about every way. But Lex Luthor, a normal human who's really intelligent, beats him and puts him in bad positions all the time because he puts him in positions where that shit doesn't matter anymore. And that's the only way you can play against all the characters are 16, 16 stat plus or average stats are 14. And it's like
it's boring.
It is. I mean, what's the fun when you win every time? I mean, have you ever seen A Nice Place to Live, the old Twilight Zone episode? Oh, what I want to go to the other place, man. This is the other place. Pool and poker and casinos and shit aren't fun when every single time you get dealt the cards, they're blackjack.
Tony, yeah, I mean, yeah, D&D is a very combat-oriented system, so better stats does mean better character. It does. And I won't lie. I mean, it's like, I've said this to Grim on more than one occasion, we use, 1 dice skill checks for everything from making swords to cooking to climbing ropes to doing all this other thing. All of our task resolution relies on rolling a d20 and comparing your skill number and then going on like it's no big deal. There's not a lot of intricate involvement. You don't have to sit here and figure out if you're going to use a sheep shank knot or whatever like that if you're using a rope. But combat, on the other hand, we don't conduct with a single skill check because the players would get mad as hell if they won or lost on the roll of a single dice. So
I disagree with this too, because would Captain America be as interesting a character if he started out with great stats? I mean, what makes him a great character is that he started out with a great personality and with a great spirit. And that's why he got chosen to get good stats. And it's like any game, it's like any movie where, the characters kind of suck if they don't have flaws, and the villains kind of suck if they're not interesting.
Exactly.
And the movie sucks if it doesn't have a good villain. Combat or not, yes, the combat is what makes the action. But sometimes the crappy stats are what make a character really interesting to play and to be around.
Yeah.
I mean, who hasn't enjoyed the character with like the 25 strength but the 3 intelligence? Come on.
Well, I played my favorite character in any game I ever played was I played a Shadowrun character once who was really into explosives, but she was completely and utterly insane.
Yeah.
And believed that she was, she basically had been caught in one of her own bombs and remembered absolutely nothing about her life except that she had been put upon the earth in a great white light and needed to show others the light.
Yeah. Well,
Had disadvantages up the wazoo and was physically basically just a melted hunk. You couldn't even tell really what the gender was.
well,
And
the
it was-
flip side. The flip side to that is like, the level 1 character who walks into the game and they're like, I am the son of the God Thor, and with my father's power and all this, I should be the most powerful person in the game. I'm like, you're level 1, nobody's ever heard of you, and you're traveling with a bunch of other people who are much more experienced and could kill you as soon as look at you. Leave that shit at the door. Or if you're going to do that, people are just going to think you're delusional.
We played a Woofrup game once. One of the characters was a dwarven troll slayer, and he got horribly mutilated by a hydra, like melted with acid. Most of his stats got reduced down to almost nothing. And so the rest of the party came together to help him find glory, even though he was barely physically capable of moving. So he just ended up carrying a whole bunch of vials of poison and then taunted a giant until it ate him. That was his way of dying with glory, despite being mentally crippled.
Can't fault that.
Somebody said something about the high intelligence, low wisdom.
Yep.
What's even more fun are the clerics that have high wisdom but incredibly low intelligence.
Oh yeah.
Because they basically play off the idea that God loves idiots and children. They're looked over, but they can't cross the street on their own without help.
Yeah, or the guy with the super duper high charisma, but they're abysmal in every other stats, like especially intelligence. It's like that becomes the classic dumb blonde dude. But anyway, we're at the hour and 30-minute mark. And I believe Grim is in desperate need of a reprieve. And I've had a lot of fun. I really have. I enjoyed. This is the highest number of viewers I've ever had. 42. That's amazing. I'm going to credit Eclectic Goat with probably bringing them all in. Thank you very much for being here today. I appreciate you.
I had a grand time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Everybody make sure you hit that daggum like button on your way out, too.
And definitely hit subscribe because I need subscribers.
Yeah.
But thanks very much for coming in today. And, tonight we're going to have another Tuesday night with the geeks. So it'll be me and Ironcaster and whoever else we can scrounge up to talk about regular geek stuff. So we'll see you then. And until then, y'all take care. Have a great week.
Peace.
The Dungeons and Dragons ride!